Good morning, afternoon, and evening, ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished others. I'm Freudian Creations, and it's time to review the top 20 OCs for the Pokemon Academy Life Forever OC Liberation Contest. Firstly, I'd like to say I'm absolutely blown away by the response to this. We got, by my count, 168 OC submissions, and that's an amazing amount of turnout. Far more than I expected or honestly was prepared for. I want to say right now how much I appreciate you, all of you. Your passion and your love for this game has really made the community great and reinvigorated my own passion countless times over the past year. I'm certain that if the previous PAL community had people as awesome as you in it, there would have been nothing for me to foreverlize. So, somewhat selfishly, I'm glad that it didn't, but even so, take that as a massive compliment, please. Now, there's just one thing I'd like to say before I begin. These represent the top 20 designs, in my own personal opinion, but these are by no means the only good ones or whatever. There were 30 additional ones I wanted to make videos on, in addition to the original 56. And cutting this down to just 20 was already extremely hard. I loved the vast majority of these OCs. So please, consider this a celebration of excellence in a field of brilliance. Just because I didn't mention your OC doesn't mean I didn't love them or remember them. And even if I gave them a lower score, that certainly doesn't mean I didn't love them or remember them either. I appreciate all the effort and all the passion and all the creativity everyone has put into their OCs, and I'm really looking forward to this opportunity to share some of that with you guys. Alright, boilerplate over. Let's get into this. First, but certainly not least, is Dean Cross. He's a rough and tumble rebel without a cause who likes to stand up for the little guy, just as much as he stands up against the big guy. And what really struck me about this character is his simple but striking design. It very much feels like the sort of design a genuine Pokemon character could actually have. Another thing that really drew my attention is the many different styles of art and many different sort of portfolio pieces that exist in this OC dossier. Let me just click through a couple of these. You see he has a bunch of different, almost like game-style character portraits here. Seems like a very emotive character. I like this expression a lot, that sort of, classic Japanese ne'er-do-well face, like the chain necklace, Hero Forge miniature. Look at those thighs. Got some beef there. Everyone's favorite ace student being menaced and threatened by Dean Cross here. It's wonderful. Love the graphic tee. Keep calm and don't slack off. This is the sort of action pose that I started this dossier with, because I really like this one. It shows his attitude a lot. The sort of aggressive but fun character. Battle Splash. And again, let's really appreciate all the different styles of art that go into Dean's dossier here. It's fantastic, honestly. We've even got a little CG, perched on his bike. Pretty nice. Well, what do you think? Pretty sweet view, yeah? This is my go-to spot when I need to kick back and relax. You can sort of sense how the softness might build up in his route. And, you've got his team, which very reasonable for Week 7 levels. Not that, necessarily having a Week 7 appropriate team is a mandatory factor. Alright, we've got some fun facts about the character here, but I actually have his bio open in a different file, and I'm just going to sort of read from that. A rambunctious youth, eager to forge his own path. Dean is a very energetic young man who isn't afraid to take action. Even though he hails from a wealthy family, the Cross family, it's mentioned previously that he got in due to his family's influence, so we can assume that perhaps one of the Nepo babies, as it were. But Dean, in spite of this, shows no respect for social status, authority, or manners. This is mainly because he attended an elite private school during his childhood and witnessed firsthand the suffocating stuffiness, elitism, and prejudices of high society. When faced with challenges, Dean has a habit of acting on instinct and resorting to physical aggression, particularly if someone insults him or his friends. While he may come across as forceful and abrasive, Dean will always support those who embrace him for who he is, no matter the consequences. So I really like this. It's a guy who was born into high society, looked around, saw all the gilded crowns, that his fellows were wearing, and thought, you know what? This is shit. I like that. Dean's hyperactive personality and strong dislike for lectures make him a challenging study companion for classmates seated beside him. This typically leads him to trying to engage in conversations or play pranks during class, causing trouble for both himself and the surrounding students. If someone else is in trouble, though, Dean will try to get them off the hook. He creates a distraction when someone arrives late, he coughs loudly to cover a ringing phone in the middle of class, and remains quiet when he spots someone cheating. It is his way of looking after fellow troublemakers, though he does not extend the same courtesy to members of the student council, or those who wronged him should they be disruptive. I like that a lot as well, this sort of just inherently anti-authority punk kind of attitude. Like that cop from the Terminator 2, I think, or maybe it was Terminator 1. Anyway, the Terminator asked a cop, "Hey, have you seen this person?" And the punk, no reason, just said, "Nah, I ain't seen him." Of course he had. It's that sort of inherently like anti-authority nature, which I find very amusing, and hopefully we'll be able to see that manifested in a positive direction later on in his route, as opposed to being just sort of, an aimless point of disorder, as it were. As a trainer, Dean's strategy is brutally simple: to use the most powerful moves and defeat the opposing team as quickly as possible. He disregards non-damaging moves as dead space, instead focusing solely on a move's power stat, without considering accuracy, potential drawbacks, or synergy with the Pokemon's base stats. This aggressive approach to battle also often results in him knocking out wild Pokemon before he can catch them. And I love that, because his simple, Monkey Smash approach to battling is surprisingly uncommon amongst the OCs, many of whom are like master tacticians. Leading into this sort of functionality is, as his future as a move tutor, as alluded to later on, is very clever. When it comes to training his team, Dean is no slouch. His constant challenges against other trainers provide him with the experience he needs to keep his Pokemon at the highest level his electives allow. After failing to join the battle team in the tryouts, and that makes a lot of sense because Janine said she wasn't looking for strength anymore, and this guy clearly is strong, but not in like an insane way. Dean became bitter and began challenging the battle team members at every opportunity in order to get back at them. So I like that. It's a sort of aggressive rival character, like the kind of character that Silver could have been in a different timeline. When he can't find someone to battle, Dean will train alongside his Pokemon, either by mimicking their moves as best he can, or by holding a target for them to attack. Dean's hands-on approach to his Pokemon's training has resulted in them successfully learning the move Takedown by charging headfirst, just like their trainer. So I love that. This very hands-on approach to training, it leads so well into the idea that, he might grow up to become a move tutor, that he might, reorient his strong drive to do something, to break the rules into breaking the rules of what Pokemon can do, as a masterful move tutor. I really like this character. He brings to mind, I'm not sure if I mentioned before, but I really like the Persona 4 character, Kanji Tatsumi, and Dean Cross very much brings to mind that character, which is fantastic. Looking at his team, we can very much see what sort of moves his Pokemon might know that feed into this sort of reckless style of battle, high jump kick, flare blitz, explosion, wild charge, I don't know, submission maybe. Lovely character, and it's only the strength of, the other top 20 that means he isn't higher. But I will be remembering Dean Cross.
Well, what do you think? Pretty sweet view, yeah? This is my go-to spot when I need to kick back and relax.
Let's talk about Emil Fraze. He is, yes, it is a he. It got me the first time too. He is a Colossian pretty boy coordinator who holds a grudge against fire types after the tragic loss of his family to flame, hence his proficiency in water, ground, and rock type electives. Generally, ground and rock aren't associated with coordination. Water is often, so it's very interesting to see, a character who is taking the beautiful sides of this less commonly considered beautiful type and making them show the gems that they are on the inside. Although it may just be that his type proficiencies are exclusively, an anti-fire choice. Let's read a little bit about him. Emil Fraze. Emil, admired by many for his playful personality, striking appearance, and his unusual way of speaking. Despite his playboy-like nature, he is a very perceptive and calculating individual. A Colossian fashionista with a fondness for sweets, he aspires to be the most flashy coordinator of his generation, enrolling in Kobukan Academy to achieve his dream. Born in the Kanto region, Emil's father passed away shortly after the birth of his younger sister. Grief-stricken, his mother impulsively decided to relocate the family back to her hometown in the Kalos region. Emil once dreamed of becoming a renowned grass-type gym leader alongside his sister, as both held a fascination towards grass types. Their mother raised an Aatc that they both loved immensely. In his adolescence, Emil and his sister got into a heated argument about something that wasn't that important at all, and it led him to lock himself in his room. Later that same day, a fire engulfed his apartment complex. His survival instincts kicked in, and he leapt through his window. Unbeknownst to him, his family was trapped inside the apartment, the fire claiming their lives. He hadn't realized until his escape, panicked, tried to run back inside, but was restrained and unable to do so by authorities. Overwhelmed by guilt for years, he did the worst thing he could do at the time and turned to the internet. But hey, it worked out for him. He was able to find comfort and distraction within the internet, and there he discovered his passion for everything fashion-related and started to practice coordinating. As an adult, Emil was able to fully move on from his family's deaths, yet his disdain for fire types still remains, and probably will forever. Now let's look through some of these pictures. You can see already this very strong design that, while simple, is very notable. The sort of Gyaro-inspired fashion that he wears, being a very unique trait for a male character, and those hips too. He definitely stands out, silhouette-wise. Just some more art of him, some more expressions. Got the sort of shadowy "hehe, I'm about to pull a prank" expression here. Sort of, quiet smile, serious face. Rare though. They have a surprised expression. Love the classic, lollipop in the mouth aesthetic. This seems to be a rendition of a confession CG, which, I have many thoughts about this. And Girlfriending Creations isn't here, but I still feel like I shouldn't probably say, what they are. This is sort of a feminine version of Emil, just a little gender swap for fun. Still very pretty. Group picture with a few friends who are rather rudely described as irrelevant here. Quite amusing, I think. And here's sort of a character scene between Gray, another one of this author's OCs, and Emil. When I first met you, I thought you were weird and annoying. And you are. Isn't that cute? So the reason I really liked this character is, besides the design, he has a really tragic backstory that I think was executed well. It's not an all-consuming burden, but definitely a part of who he is. It leads well into possible plot threads and scenes. He has an adorable design. I've mentioned before that, the Gyaru style is peak. On a guy, ever more so, and a Gyaro-inspired coordinator is a fascinating and fun concept, because, so many coordinators are just, pop aesthetics, but going into the Gyaro aesthetic specifically is very fun.
Oh, then tell me, how do you feel about me, Red?
Let's talk about Whale Lord's girlfriend, Angel Lkti. The concept for this character is extremely fun, and that's largely why this character is in here. We're all too familiar with the story of the Mystery Dungeon games. A human gets sent to a Pokemon-only world transformed into a Pokemon. This is a story that reverses that formula. What happens if a Pokemon from a Pokemon-only world gets sent to the Palf world as a human trainer? I can't wait to find out. Let's expand this open. Entry number 1337. Leet. Tomorrow is the big day. Angel and I will depart from Treasure Town to investigate a newly discovered mystery dungeon with the Wigglytuff Guild. We're confident that this expedition will be successful, as we have already explored many mystery dungeons, and saved the world twice before. So this is post-game Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers. Now, this is very much a veteran character, having saved the world twice. Entry number 1353. I can't believe it. I got sent to the human world, transformed into a human. Light novel title. Wigglytuff, Chatot, Loudred, Bidoof, Angel, and I, notice that will become relevant, made it to the deepest point of the mystery dungeon when a dark void suddenly sucked us all into it. I saw a flash of light, and then found myself lying on the ground with several strange red and white colored orbs scattered around me. I was approached by two humans named Will and Sabrina, who explained to me that I was in the human world. They explained that I look like a totally normal human to them. They then read my mind, learned what happened to me, and offered to help me. I gathered my belongings on the strange orbs. I should investigate those orbs later. Entry number 1356. Oh no! The Wigglytuff Guild are trapped inside those orbs. Angel is still missing. I could temporarily release and recall them from the orbs, but I could only hear them cry their names repeatedly while they are released. I must save them, and then get us back to the Pokemon world. So that's fun, that Angel can't, well, the second Angel, as it were, can't actually, understand her old Pokemon companions. Entry number 1360. Will is a nice human. He advised me to use a human name in the human world. I named myself Angel Lkti after my partner and who I truly am. Will also advised me to enroll for studying at Kobukan Academy like Sabrina. He explained they couldn't help me return to the Pokemon world, but hopes that I can learn how to do so. Now this is what I think is very fun, like a Pokemon from the PMD world who ended up in the human world as a human. This is a cute design with a clever concept. The name is similarly clever, considering how obvious it is, calling to stark attention the fact that Pokemon in the PMD world all use mononyms, like this character refers to Loudred and Bidoof and Wigglytuff just by their name, right? It also makes clear that Angel is the partner of the player character because the original Angel is the only person who is referred to by a human name. And this is much cooler, I think, than Angel being the human player character sent back to the human world, or just being a random Pokemon from that world. It's also possible that Angel Lkti is like a fusion of the human player character, Angel, and the Skitty partner. Because the original Angel is still missing, right? So maybe Skitty is now in like the original Angel's body. I don't know. Maybe we'll find out. Entry number 1379. I enrolled for the normal elective, which should help me learn more about my teammates' potential. Sabrina says she will be taking the psychic elective taught by Will himself. My homeroom will be taught by Professor Chris Cherry. Now this is another interesting part, like, these are all members of the Wigglytuff Guild. I never noticed how many normal types there were, but it totally makes sense to be a normal specialist in this scenario while, this is your team. Entry number 1381. Humans are so cruel! Today, Professor Cherry showed us how they make those orbs called Pokeballs. Humans use Pokeballs to catch Pokemon, and then they make the caught Pokemon battle each other. Professor Cherry gave each member of the class a baby Pokemon to raise. As fate would have it, I got a Skitty, the Pokemon I used to be. I would cherish and love her, like how Angel and I took care of the Manaphy. Cute reference to PMD's postgame. Entry number 1391. I'm heartbroken. Today, Professor Cherry made us go out into the fields and catch a Pokémon as our assignment. I caught an Eevee, which impressed the class, but I feel guilty because Eevee is no longer free. I can't stay here any longer. I must escape from this cruel world. It's interesting that, from the perspective of a Pokémon, the Pokémon-human relationship is one of entrapment. A possible recruit to Team Plasma? Entry number 1412. Today I learned that my classmate, Tia, is a Pokémon called Latias. She kept saying that she wanted to become a human. Why would she, a Pokémon, want to capture other Pokémon? She's a meanie! This is a very interesting point of view, just like a fascinating perspective that'd be really fun to write from. Entry number 1417. Tia is missing. Good for her. But Will and Sabrina are missing too. I hope that they're safe, so this is around week 6, Entry number 1425. Today, Professor Oak mentioned something about mythical psychic-typed Pokémon. Apparently, 2 of them, Hoopa and Cosmog, can create portals between realms. I believe that the key to my return lies in finding them. I will ask Instructor Wool about this in the Psychic Elective later. So we can assume that Angel Lkti is going to eventually become a Psychic-type user as well. Perhaps grab some, Psychic Normal types. Oranguru, or Girafarig, perhaps. Anyway, I really like how the bio was written, being, in-character journal entries. It also implies a path forward for Angel's route in-game. I thought it was really clever. I liked the design. I mean, it's a character builder, but it's extremely cute and got a little choker. Gotta love the choker. And it's just, it is a very loving representation of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, specifically Explorers, which is, obviously it's the best game. And it's known I'm a sucker for PMD, so playing the judges is a valid strategy. Well done.
I can't believe it. I got sent to the human world, transformed into a human.
Heroki Bennett, class of 1950, Kobukon's current janitor. A wise and kind old man who's been through it all and has a most unlikely granddaughter, Elisa. This is a story that's going to tug on your heartstrings. Born in Johto, Heroki Bennett was born in 1938, and he dreamed of becoming a Pokemon champion. Working hard to scrap together funds, Heroki managed to get into Kobukon in 1950 at 22 years old. His starter Pokemon was a Lillipup, and he cherished it deeply, forming a close bond nearly immediately. He studied the normal and poison electives at first, doing well, but pivoted to learning electric upon meeting a young Unovan woman, Elena Jolene, who took electric and flying electives. Unbeknownst to him, Elena would become the grandmother of the future supermodel Elisa, and him the grandfather. They fell in love and spent most of their free time studying together, though, in hopes of helping his love succeed, Heroki spent 90% of his study time looking at electric and flying. Unfortunately, because of this, Heroki fell behind in his normal and poison studies, and as such, Lillipup fell behind. Heroki started to lose battles in gym class, and when finals came up, he received middling points for his level 14 Lillipup. Heroki's heart was crushed as he failed to graduate, having to either re-enroll again or find a different path in life. Worse, during this time, Elena became pregnant, providing another mouth they'd need to support. After struggling for months, Heroki could not find a job that paid enough to support the 3 of them. Elena, seeing the writing on the wall, sat down and discussed with Hikori about not having him claim the child as his, sparing him the responsibility of paying for their support. The downside of this meant that Elena would move back with her parents in Unova, and the two would split paths. Heroki was heartbroken and felt ashamed, but accepted her proposition. The two never saw each other face to face. But they did send letters to each other at least once a month for the rest of Elena's life. Elena would give birth to a girl who would later become the mother of Elisa, and she would also write letters to Heroki when she was old enough, though, due to unfortunate circumstances, the two would eventually lose contact and never meet face to face either. Elena would go on to marry a strapping young lad, and they would remain so until she passed away from breast cancer in 1976. Heroki moved to Kanto and worked as a receptionist in Saffron City until, in 1976, about 5 months before Elena's passing, he was framed for the murder of an important local politician. Heroki was forced to go on the run to protect himself. During that time, he kept sending letters to Elena explaining himself, but she was never able to send any in return. Her words of encouragement and reassurance went with her to the grave. Eventually, after the March on Silphco, years later, his name was cleared as the true culprit was caught and convicted. During the years to come, Heroki would return to Inspira and get a job as a janitor at Kobukan. He never hid his situation from them, but they gave him the benefit of the doubt. Years before the news broke about the true culprit, they would have defended his character as innocent. Over the years, Heroki kept taking care of Lilliput, studying and training her in his off time, as his passion for Pokemon never left, and she eventually reached level 55 and became an elderly Stoutland. He also has a habit of taking in struggling wild Pokemon, raising them like his own, including a goofy Alolan Grimer, a runt Mary, Minccino, who became a Chinchino, and a horde of local Pidovs. Heroki gets along well with the staff and students alike, who view him as a wise and kind grandfather figure, and Drayden has made sure to give him as secure of a living wage as a janitor can, and is saving some extra funds to give him a good retirement. He has not directly met any of our known cast, but would be a wise, wistful grandfather figure to them, and would probably help fill the missing role of a father figure in both Red's and especially Blue's lives. If he was in the game, the quest would have Red help unite him with Elisa. So, I love this, because it's a shockingly realistic story about the people who can fall through the cracks, even in this idealistic fantasy world. It's not a tragic story, it's just the story of a person who accumulates hardship across 76 years. It's realistic, I think. Being able to tell a story that is meaningful and purposeful, but notably not fantastical like this, shows a great understanding of the parameters and boundaries of this world, and shows a keen intellect on the part of the author. The story is very sweet and sad, but it ends with a hopeful note, as the author tells us how his route may play out if he were to be in the game. Usage of... Actually, let's look at his party for a bit now. So this is the Stoutland that was a Lillipup. And something I really appreciate about this is the natures, the IVs, the items, the characteristics. They all say a lot about the Pokemon in question. The usage of IVs and movesets and items and natures shows a great deal of thought was put into his team, and that's something I very much like. This is a pretty darn optimal muck. Look at that. Yeah, that's good. I like that. Although, actually, Jolly Nature. Well, we aren't going for optimization here. He is, after all, a Oh my gosh! I'm terrified. Yeah, no, this is this is the weakest Unova pigeon. Good lord, this is I mean, Pandora's box has been opened. My eyes have seen things that no mortal was ever meant to see. All hail the swarm, I give my life and soul unto it. Well done. This is very cute. I like Heroki a lot. He's a very grounded, lovable character. Good job.
Hi there, Mr. Wanzi Bennett here, cutting in ever so slightly to say that the author of this, the Aura Ranger, has also included a letter written to Heroki by Elena, and I'm not going to read the entirety of the thing out to you, but I am just going to pop it on screen for you to make sure you can have a little bit of a read of yourself, because I think it's very important to help you understand the nature of those two's relationship. Despite circumstance, they loved each other to the bitter end, and that's just absolutely adorable, and it broke my heart. So yeah, very good job. I echo absolutely everything that Freud said about this entry. It's fantastic. One must remember to laugh at their life, or else be swallowed by it.
Arya Hawthorne, a sporty future ranger running from her father's dull plans for her future, and chasing the ghost of a mother she does not remember. Let's talk about her a bit. Brash, quick to smile, and with a dirty sense of humor, Arya is not everyone's cup of tea. The only daughter of a single father, she spent much of her time in Aspertius City, with her maternal grandfather, her Pop-Pop, enjoying nature, camping in the forest and hunting for bugs, much to the dismay of her father. Arya's love for the outdoors and bug-type Pokemon turned into a passion when she saved a Joltik, Zips, from a wild pit-of attack at age 10, nurturing him back to health. Zips became her first Pokemon, and she swore to never evolve him when she found out that he may be one of the biggest Joltik in existence, a respectable 15 centimeters in height.
Oh, that's a big boy. He's a big boy. He's a big one.
Arya stands at an average height with an athletic frame. Her complexion is tan, the result of her active lifestyle, and she likes to have her jet black hair very short, usually only leaving a single braid to hang at the side of her face. She sports friendly, light blue eyes, freckles, and a broad smile. I feel directly targeted by this design. When she is not wearing her school uniform, she likes to wear a yellow tracksuit, that she actually also wears under her uniform, one of the few things that she has to remember her mother by, the other being Apollo, her mother's breviary. Arya doesn't know much about her mother, since she passed away when she was a toddler. Most of what she knows about her comes from Pop-Pop. Her father, deeply affected by his wife's death, immersed himself in his work, and while he never neglected his daughter, providing anything she may need, he was emotionally distant. He is not comfortable with Arya spending so much of her time with her Pop-Pop, a man he sees as immature and childish, and he often butts heads with him, each one telling the other that they are doing their job wrong. In those moments, Arya usually prefers to just walk away, accompanied by Zips and Lafayette, sometimes wondering what kind of woman her mother was, if even after so many years from her death, she still affects her family in a profound way. Hoping Arya would pursue a career in accounting or statistics like him, her father sent her to Kobukan. Although he never outright prohibited her from becoming a ranger, he showed discomfort with the idea, possibly linked to her mother's death. He never told her how she passed away, actually, and seeing how much pain the issue caused to his father and Pop-Pop, she ultimately decided to just leave it be. Despite appreciating her father's efforts, Arya is determined in becoming a ranger, and prefers to follow her passion for the outdoors. Her team at Kobukan reflects this aspiration as well. All her Pokemon are there to help her in her theoretical rescue missions. Apollo helps to scan the surroundings thanks to his keen sight, and also usually carries her when he is flying. Olimar, her Araquanid, is in charge of any aquatic rescue, with her water bubble helping her carry others to safety. Lilith, her Fletchinder, provides warmth with her flame body, and also helps Apollo in his scouting duties. Jack, her Lkti, is a fiercely loyal Pokemon with a big sense of justice. A little overzealous for Arya's taste, but she can't negate how useful his tinted lens are when fighting or calming hostile Pokemon. And finally, Zips is just a little guy. He's just a little guy. He's a little guy. Come on, he's a little guy. And he also helps in critical emergencies when a quick electric shock is needed to restart someone. The only outlier is her Kobukan starter, Azora. I'm not coding illusion. Azora called Larvesta. Interesting. The little Pokemon disguised as his namesake when Arya first opened his Pokeball. After some initial confusion, she decided to just keep him, and also broaden her studies a little more, signing up to Dark-type electives. She doesn't truly know what to do with him, but if fate decided to make them partners, she is not going to leave the little guy behind. So, what I love about this is, firstly, she has an extremely good design, a strong and striking color palette. Now, this is her with the tracksuit on underneath the uniform. This is her just in the tracksuit. It works well. The Zora, named Larvesta, that was disguising itself, is extremely amusing. And the justification for the party members shows like a lot of thought was put into her party composition. Also, the submission is just full of fun details that show there's a lot of love for the character. Her giant Joltik, the aforementioned Larvesta the Zora, her grandfather being named Pop-Pop and arguing with her dad, and the fun nicknames for her Pokemon. Clearly, this is a character whose little corner of the world has been fleshed out well. Also, there's a bit of a mystery in terms of the mother and perhaps the conflict with the father. One can easily see how those would be resolved throughout the course of her route. Finally, and although it may be Crash, a significant contributor to my enjoyment of this particular OC can be summarized as Heart Smash? Just Heart Smash. Heart Smash. Smash. Great Smash. Heart Smash. Yep. Let's move on. Arya Hawthorne, well done.
Hey, you! You better be looking after your Pokemon. They're the only defense you've got against you in the great outdoors.
Who's that Pokemon? It's clearly not a Pokemon, but a respectable student from the prestigious Academy of Kobukan, Truman Wudo. I suppose it is normal to doubt him, after all. He does look like the famous Pokemon, Wudo, but he is clearly not one. After all, how could a wild Pokemon just enter the renowned Kobukan Academy without any of the personnel noticing him and even somehow being able to find a school uniform? That is some wild imagination you have. It certainly wasn't because each Kobukan teacher Truman encountered was simply too old, too drunk, or too busy trying to secure a pizza to notice him. I mean, please, there's a ninja in the establishment. Are you going to tell me that the ninja actually found Truman interesting because he was able to hide his true identity in plain sight? Even if it was true, how could you justify that a wild pseudo-Udo was able to find a school uniform and look so dazzling in it? Do you really think it was Tia who gifted him her clothes because she's actually a legendary Pokemon who can create an illusion to disguise herself as a human, so she doesn't need the clothing she was provided anyway and just give it to Truman? Do you realize how stupid that sounds? Now that you've abandoned the idea that Truman is a pseudo-Udo, let me talk about what a good student Truman is. First of all, he's always early to his class, and he never makes a sound to disrupt his classmates, and he always wears a smile on his face. No matter the situation, but especially in class. He's a regular of Mr. Ramos's classroom and always listens attentively to his teaching and always respects him, despite his old age. He is so captivated by his class that he always takes the grass elective, no matter what. Multiple students reported that they saw Truman writing in his notebook his intention to become a true plant type. But as he's not a Pokemon, it probably only means that he wishes to become a grass-type champion, as it shows with his team composed of only grass-type Pokemon. When he takes care of his Pokemon, he shows devotion toward his grass Pokemon comparable to Claire with her dragon types. His free time is usually spent in the garden, where he likes to interact with his two friends, Tia and Erica. Interesting combination. Indeed, Tia's disability does not prevent Truman from becoming friends with Tia. When students see them in the garden, they're usually playing a very fun game named Bury Yourself in the Ground. This is a very normal game that normal humans play. Trust me, I never lie. Now let's talk about Truman's other friend, Erica. At first, Erica was highly suspicious of Truman at first. She believed that he was actually a pseudo-Udo. Crazy, am I right? But her suspicion quickly ended when she realized that Truman was not only a good student, but also an excellent writer. Something that's impossible for a wild Pokemon, except if Truman somehow found a book after defeating a weak trainer and started to learn from it to know how to write as a human, but like I established earlier, what is the chance of that happening? Even more, Truman and Erica like to write together during their free time, and she greatly appreciates his books, which is a breath of fresh air compared to her other books. All in all, Truman is an exemplary student whose confidence and professionalism are to be praised. But like all, he does have some faults. First of all, he regularly forgets to hydrate himself, even in the hot summer. This can't be healthy. But another weird thing about him is his complete disdain for the rock type. Each time he fights one, he loses his smile and orders all of his Pokemon to focus their attacks on it. No one knows why. Some people think it is because he's got some sort of trauma with rock Pokemon. But for me, it seems that he is just, not disgusted by the opposing opponent, but, of himself. As if he remembered his own weakness, his own flesh. But that doesn't make sense. Anyway, he's a very normal human person who's most definitely not a pseudo-Wudo that everyone's just sort of watching to see what happens. I like how Truman is a very regular, normal human guy. Okay, on a more serious note, the script describing Truman, this sort of indignant, active denial, was very fun to read. I very much enjoyed reading this. His design is exactly what you'd expect, and it works. Also, metrosexual rep. Hell yeah. This is like the Pokemon equivalent of Octodad, and of all of the secretly a Pokemon OCs, there's like 4 of them, I think, probably the most obvious, and also the funniest. Despite the joke, though, there's some serious depth, some surprising interesting writing room for me here. Being able to write as a Pokemon is a very interesting trait, having this apparent human-level intelligence, and, of course, hating rock types for some reason. I'd love to know what that's about. I think the most interesting part of this, though, is that he's able to maintain a friendly relationship with Erica because he's a Pokemon, and she's only been poisoned towards humans. I just really enjoyed Truman Wudo, and I laughed, and anything that makes me laugh has to get high points. Well done. Godspeed, Truman Wudo. Godspeed.
I'm not voicing this thing. I'm sorry, I'm not. But what I will say is this thing has had me in stitches for the past, 10 minutes while I've been editing this section. Oh, really good job. Really good job, bro. Well done.
Let's talk about Orange Citra. Is this video going to get taken down for piracy now? Well, I'll tell you if any Nintendo ninjas start smashing through my window, but, if the entire project hasn't done it yet, I don't think it'll happen yet. Let's read this blurb before we go over the pictures, because I think it's best experienced from this sort of context. The tragedy was actually meant to be a celebration, an exhibition match between the Orange and Indigo Leagues to combat the, at the time, dwindling viewership of the Orange Leagues as people all around the world turned their interest to the Alola region's greater variety of Pokemon and eye-catching competitive events. Competing in the match were the 4th member of the Indigo League Elite Four, Lance, and the then champion of the Orange League, Clementine Citra. This is sort of an interesting kind of comparison that you make here between the Orange League and Alola, because it very much seems that, the Orange Archipelago was meant to be somewhat analogous to Hawaii before they actually made, a Hawaii region. Ash was a winner in both leagues, after all. The match was coming to a close when it happened, both trainers down to their last Pokemon. Citra's Charizard, Akuma, had been out longer than any other Pokemon the entire match, sweeping Lance's previous 2 Dragonites on his own. Now he just had to bring down the 3rd. To the unfamiliar eye, anyone would have believed it was Clementine's fight to lose. The original text here does say it's Lance's fight to lose, but that means that Lance is the winner, so it's Clementine's fight to lose. The sunlight was harsh, and Akuma was surging with Blaze and Belly Drum. To the trainers themselves, however, the end result was clear. By this point, Clementine had already proven the mettle of the Orange League and successfully drawn attention back to the archipelago. If he had just stopped then, surrendered the exhibition match in good faith, no one would have blamed him, and they would still have gained everything they needed to sustain life on the archipelago for a little while longer. But he didn't want a little while longer. Clementine longed for the times when the Orange Archipelago flourished, when they were adored by everyone across the world. In the seasons between the Kanto anime and the Johto anime. Digging his heels in, he called for one last Flare Blitz. Despite his critical injuries, Akuma reared his head and charged, and the ancient Charizard's flame went out. After Akuma's death and the shameful disappearance of his father soon afterwards, Orange, our protagonist, had to step up for everyone else on Pomelo Island and take his place. That involved helping keep the younger kids in line, wrangling Pokemon, and trying to keep the Orange League alive, even in its decline. In time, Orange became jaded and superficial, became impatient with the things and people that didn't provide value immediately, and gained a short fuse after being taken to the end of his rope every time he had to deal with bratty children, or adult tourists who just felt like acting like brats. Even with the help of the gym leaders, it was a lot for him to take in at the time. But with the help of his partner Pokemon, Cherry, an oddly golden Charmander whose flames had grown pinkish after consuming the berries on Pinken Island, who was able to beat and dominate any wild Pokémon in the archipelago. That included the elusive Crystal Onix, which became his second Pokémon. With a starter Pokémon bred to genetic perfection, and egg moose that rivaled Mons with years of combat experience, it was inevitable that Orange would grow into a massive ego, even if his lack of training prevented the prodigious Cherry from ever evolving. He wasn't quite as slimy as any corporate bigwig on the mainland, but he was blind to how shallow and fake he had become in his desperation to keep people coming to the archipelago. When Orange was accepted to Kobukan, it came as his big break. Now he had a stage, a real way to make people see how amazing the people and Pokemon of the Orange Archipelago could really be. This was his chance. He had been waiting for this, training for this. He was invincible! He'd go on to lose the Battle Team qualifiers, and face criticism from his peers for forcing a life-or-death Flare Blitz strategy meant for Charizard onto Cherry. When Orange returned to his dorm, he wanted to scream, cry, lash out. After everything, he had let everyone back home down. He could feel his fire dying down, the burning heat that used to feed his pride shrinking to embers. But what more could he do now? What could he do with all this passion? How could he make that flame last? Pokemon Academy Life, forever. Okay, let's talk about this. Orange Citra is a man who, in pursuit of bringing glory to his declining hometown and region, lost the glory he brought to it. An absolutely fascinating character, a troubled and almost villainous character. Few people are willing to make their OC effectively a bad guy. And a current bad guy at that, not just a refugee from, like, an evil team. But it's obvious there's room for redemption here, for Orange to return to the man he was, and we haven't even addressed the loss he must feel from seeing his father just sort of run away from his failure. He must miss his father terribly, but right now he's just so focused on the job, on finishing the job, he hasn't had time to process those emotions yet. I imagine this is what his route would be about, talking to Red, beginning to understand why he feels the way he does, and then finally letting it all out. But that's just my interpretation of the character. Admittedly, a shiny Charmander and a Crystal Onix may be a little much for a trainer at the very start of his Kobukan experience, but I say that only because I see so much potential for growth. It seems wasteful to hand out such big boons on day one. I would love to see how Orange develops, and I think he would add some much appreciated diversity of attitude to the game. Let's just go through the pictures here. You can see his somewhat vaguely tropical team. Very cool looking guy. Little patience. Been there, my guy. So this appears it will be Cherry. When Cherry is older, you can see the pink flame there and pink eyes from the Pinken berries. Very fun. Who doesn't love good old Pinken? Pinken Island. And this is Orange Citra in the hole, in the flesh. Simple design, but quite effective. Thank you, Orange Citra, for your time.
The islands have been through enough. I've got to bring them back to their glory days, no matter what it takes.
Sorry. What are we? Oh, right. Yeah, sorry. I've just been up all night. We're talking about Hadrien Slate now, right? Okay. Let's see. I think I've got notes on him somewhere. All right. Yeah. Let's get into this. An eccentric trainer with an unnerving gaze. Although hailing from the bustling city of Nimbasa in Unova, young Hadrien spent most of his childhood with his grandparents on the outskirts of Lostlorn Forest, where he met his partner, don't say it, Zora. Ah, yes, said it. I'm not coding illusion. At 13, he was taken back by his father, now a well-off businessman with strong connections, to live in the heart of Nimbasa City. Having spent his childhood outdoors, Hadrien was not used to the bustling city and its crowded entertainment venues. His father's strict curfew rules further fueled his annoyance. prompting him to start sneaking out in the dead of night to the forest surrounding the city in search of peace. It was during these nightly excursions that he discovered the moonlit world where nocturnal Pokémon roamed. This is an extremely strong start because we can already get an idea of his attitude, of his passions, and, key point, of the mechanics that will tie into him. I love characters that have clear mechanics tied into them, and this is already apparent from the first paragraph. Hadrien was enrolled at Kobukan Academy by his father after being caught on one of his nightly ventures. Even at the academy, he continues his escapades, either roaming the campus unseen by the disciplinary committee, or venturing into the forest to observe nocturnal Pokémon. However, these nightly outings have taken a toll on his appearance, giving him a constant look of lethargy and fatigue, and have also affected his studies, as he often struggles to stay awake during electives. Well, made the same mistake back in college. You can't burn the candle at both ends, guys. Sleep is the best study aid. Though he often wears a dour expression and exhibits a lethargic demeanor, Hadrien's demeanor changes dramatically when talking about Pokémon, especially when discussing their nature and lifestyle. This surprising contrast between his aloof appearance and his passionate, energetic voice about Pokémon can catch people off guard. It caught me off guard, and I love it. As a student, Hadrien tries his best to focus on his studies and stay awake during electives, but he refuses to sacrifice his nightly outings for better grades. He listens with rapt attention during Miss Cherry's lectures, and often seeks her out in the garden during free periods to discuss Pokémon or rests under a shade. He struggles to make friends due to his dour looks and self-proclaimed unsettling smile, but he eagerly joins conversations involving Pokémon and believes he can get along with anyone who shares his passion for them. So I love this character's design. Let's open a window here so we can really sort of zoom in on it. Look at that face. Look at that creepy ass smile. He wears Crocs. Well, nobody's perfect. And this is him when he's actually managed to get a decent amount of sleep. Charming, charming. I love that. Cool little gloves too. So what I love about Hadrien Slate is he's a creepy looking guy who rules the night, but would be your best friend if you give him a chance, as long as you like Pokemon. He's an absolutely fantastic design, genuinely stellar in conveying this run-ragged caffeine addict who's been burning the candle at both ends for too long. It also really suits his partner Zoroark, I've got to admit. The juxtaposition between this edgy, tired design and his friendly and very pro-Pokemon personality is very charming and surprisingly unique in this crowd. Also, I mentioned this before, tying the character so tightly into night is a very fun idea. It opens up a lot of narrative opportunities with him. Perhaps the scenes could only occur at night. Perhaps he could run afoul of the disciplinary committee. There's a lot I'd like to unpack here. I'm sure he would be a very, very fun character to write for, to read about. And again, I can't get over how much I love this design. It's really fantastic. Well done, Hadrien Slate.
I like breezy clothes, okay? What's wrong with Crocs?
Cooper Ketcher, attorney at law. Or perhaps it should be attorney at large. Who can say? Let's talk about him. Cooper is described as well-behaved, but quiet, often preferring to observe and analyze rather than speak. He tends to overthink his words as he views conversations and relationships as complex games of information exchange. As such, he's a loner, but he doesn't mind. Cooper was born and raised in Eterna City. As a youth, he found a stray Gligar along cycling road which became his partner. He was drawn to its evil-looking appearance, yet playful personality. One day, Cooper accidentally walked onto Team Galactic Eterna building premises while playing with Gligar, and a grunt stole it after battling him. Cooper was furious and turned to the law for assistance. However, the police had their hands tied as the grunt who confiscated Gligar was technically in their rights, and Cooper was a trespasser who lost a quote-unquote fair fight. The local attorneys were in Galactic's pockets, so they refused to help. Although Cooper failed to reclaim Gligar, this was a pivotal moment that planted the seeds for him to begin researching the law, so he would never be swindled by loopholes or corrupt authority again. However, he also became distrustful of the system and was focused only on learning it so he could take matters into his own hands. So he's a lawyer who knows exactly where the law's power ends, and exploits that for justice, both by operating within that boundary and in the dark outside. Very cool character concept, sort of Daredevil-esque in execution. First, Cooper began to collect dirt on Galactic. He made his first breakthrough after an article about the local bike shop owner's Clefairy being abducted by Galactic got published, which sparked discourse about others being robbed by the same group. Cooper would investigate these instances and slowly gathered testimony. By sheer coincidence, he bumped into Looker, who had been scoping out the building. Looker was onto Galactic, but lacked a warrant to enter. Cooper was able to provide him with enough cause to search the building, which eventually led to the raid that resulted in Galactic having to return all the stolen Pokémon, including Glycar. Afterwards, Looker provided Cooper with legal contacts to civilly sue Galactic in a class action. It took a few years, but when the dust settled, Cooper was granted a small fortune, and his efforts in investigating Galactic landed him a position as an assistant in the firm that represented him. Here, Cooper flourished, quickly learning the ins and outs of legal battling, both figuratively and literally. At first, he was only permitted to help with intakes and filing while in school. Then, during the summer, he discovered he had a talent for proper litigation. Shadowing the attorneys, his ability to analyze the opposing counsel's team and decipher their plans ahead of time proved instrumental in winning a number of cases. He would not only observe the opponent's Pokémon, but also the trainer themselves. Discerning their habits and preferences lets him make eerily accurate predictions as to how battles would play out. This, combined with his weaponized knowledge of the law, allowed him to draft the most calculated, devastating strategies to always assure victory. Presently, he's enrolled at Kobukon to become a proper, licensed attorney, while the firm covers his tuition. Oh, isn't that the dream? Although Cooper is a genius, on paper, he soon learned that actual commandeering of Pokémon is much more difficult. Despite his extensive understanding of battling, he struggles to effectively communicate his thoughts to his Pokémon in real time. Likewise, without extensive preparation, he suffers from on-the-spot analysis paralysis, causing him to lose most matches. This also bleeds into his social life, being able to pick apart people, but unable to casually speak to them. As a result, he's a man of few words and doesn't have friends beyond mutually beneficial classmates. His electives are Flying, Flying representing the law giving him the wings to free himself and protect others, Useful for its wide range of diverse Pokémon, his light side, and Dark, which represents law granting him a cheat sheet to do what he pleases. There's a natural affinity for it, willing to get his hands dirty to win. This represents his dark side. He can be your Engel or your devil. I love the character a lot. Let's go through the other fantastic bits of art that sort of show the character here. So this is his ideal team. Flying and Dark, as you can see. Honestly, very competitive, considering he's restricting himself to 2 types. You can sort of see the full ideal team here. But remember that his ideal is not necessarily reality, and this made me laugh a lot when I saw it. This is his current team. He has not discovered where to find Litten or Sprigatito, and even if he had, he could not at this current time handle them. It's an extremely funny sort of dichotomy between his self-assured, genius persona, this wielder of the law as, his blade, and then the reality of, well, everyone's got to start somewhere, dude, and you're what? You're a 2L? 1L? That means first year or second year law student for those not in the know. We've got a couple relationships here. I'll leave this up while I'm talking some more about why I like the character so much. One can imagine there are a lot of untold stories like this in the Pokemon world where power and violence is such an implicit part of every interaction. As peaceful as the Pokemon world is, it's peaceful because everybody has a superpowered pet, right next to them. And that's sort of the peace that comes with mutual destruction, just to the nth degree. So one can imagine that there are lots of stories like this in this world that just we never get to see, and a simple person like Cooper, who sees the injustice inherent in the system, could be a catalyst for massive change. And I think that'd be a really fun and interesting story to explore. Sort of like a non-violent version of Rusted Swords, if that makes sense. Also, I think his relationships with the characters here are well thought out and very entertaining. Well done, Cooper.
If you can't beat the house, learn to count the cards.
Let's talk about the mechanic with a manic mind for mechs, mates. Michaela Mika Gunhill. An eccentric and optimistic tinker with an uncanny obsession for mechs. Mika often loses herself to bursts of creativity, working on mech prosthetics, scanners, and even experimental held items for her Pokémon. Her unhinged nature emerges in moments of intense focus, where Mika becomes singularly obsessed with perfecting their designs or proving a theoretical concept, occasionally forgetting to eat or sleep. Mika's childhood in Laos City, Hoenn, nestled among the technological marvels of the region, was shaped by a cityscape where advanced machinery and cutting-edge technology coexist with nature. From an early age, she was captivated by the sleek designs and powerful capabilities of mechs used for both practical and recreational purposes in the city. Okay, I gotta know what, you would use a recreational mech for. This interest extended to her fascination with Pokémon, leading to a niche preference for machine-like Pokémon or those with sleek, armored appearances. But she has an Aggron. Most of Mika's childhood was spent among researchers responsible for the city's technological advancements, including her parents and many of their colleagues. This environment led Mika to immerse herself in studying engineering principles and experimenting with miniaturized mech models from a young age. Despite her love for technology, Mika also developed a strong bond with Pokémon. Her parents often volunteered at the city's Pokémon Center, where she assisted in maintaining the facility's healing machines, and learned about the harmonious integration of technology with Pokémon care. These experiences solidified Mika's belief that mechs could not only assist trainers in battles, but also enhance the quality of life for Pokémon in various ways. Her enrollment at Kobukan came from her parents' concern that she was spending too much time in her workshop and not getting enough human interaction. They hoped she would make new friends there, though she often ends up hanging out in the research lab working on projects for most of the week. Honestly, a simple character. No tragedy, no great internal struggle to overcome, just a simple, kind dream to achieve. It just so happens, this simple, kind dream is incredibly badass. Speaking of badass, let's take a look at her. This design pops off the paper. Her design and color scheme is fantastic. The bright blue hair is especially eye-catching, and it contrasts notably well with the red of her default headphones here. Notice I said default. Let's look at the next picture. Having multiple headsets for different tasks, like this and this, is an awesome visual quirk. One can totally imagine the different sprites she'd have for that, like the different scenes where she would put these new headsets on. Her additional art, this one, obviously, makes her seem extremely fun, expressive, and animated. I mean this in the greatest complimentary way possible. She looks like a My Hero Academia character. I love it, honestly. I love the art style, I love the design, I love the expressiveness. This cool little thing she has at the corners of her eyes where the white spikes out as eyelashes. That's just such a clever choice. I love that. I really do. The little Tron lines over the classic Hoenn protagonist hat is fantastic as well. And she's so freaking cute. Just adorable. Pretty. Smart. It's just brilliant. I am no longer saying words. I'm just gushing. I wish there was more I could say, but it's an extremely simple character, executed so well. I love it. Look at her with her little Golurk here. This is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic character. I imagine she would be a lot of fun both to write and read. Well done, Michaela Gunhill. Well done.
Oh my god, Red, there you are. I've been looking for you all over. I've just completed my latest invention. I'm sure you'll find it really interesting.
Reginald Stelford. Beep, 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 beep. Beep, 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 beep. An Ether Foundation wildlife rehabilitator who saw God and made a fursuit of him that he now lives in. But this is executed so well. Let's read about him. Reginald, originally from Lilyco City in Hoenn, used to live a fairly normal life. But one day, when strolling Route 120 west of the city, a group of Pokémon poachers sought to capture a herd of wild Tropius on the route. Reginald was only a child at the time, so though while he tried, he obviously could not prevent these poachers from getting to the Tropius. However, in a miraculous turn of events, Registeel, whom Reginald had only heard of from legends, appeared before the poachers and attacked them, protecting the route and the Tropius from further harm. This event inspired Reginald greatly to help protect Pokémon, his inspiration being, of course, Registeel. He studied hard and applied to work at the Ether Foundation. He saved and devoted quite a bit of money during his time working and used this to commission a hyper-realistic suit of a Registeel, intending to use it to help the injured Pokémon housed at the Foundation. However, when he first deployed his suit, his co-workers mocked him and the Pokémon seemed quite afraid of the giant metal beast. This all changed one day when two Pokémon got into a heated battle at the Conservation Center. While it is perfectly natural for Pokémon to want to battle each other, the two Pokémon in question were still recovering, so them battling meant a serious risk to both their lives, and thus, Reginald jumped in between the two fighting Pokémon, following the example of the Registeel he encountered years before. The two Pokémon stopped fighting, and due to the bravery Reginald showed that day, the other Pokémon that witnessed the event stopped being afraid of him. In fact, the Pokémon of the Ether Foundation saw him as their big protector, and huddled around him all the time since the incident. Reginald became a well-respected employee due to his brave efforts that day. His co-workers started greatly respecting his dedication to helping the injured Pokémon, and, after a while, everyone started calling him Registeely, which he seemed to like. Reginald does, of course, have his own Pokémon. He has an Alcremia Lemon form to help with the rust management of his suit. Additionally, he owns a Clawitzer that knows Heal Pulse to help injured Pokémon. He's not the most competent battler out there, since he mainly focuses on restoring the health of the Pokémon in rehabilitation, but he can defend himself if needed, and the Pokémon in rehabilitation do need a healthy environment in which they can battle. When all else fails, he does have a giant metal suit. Reginald has contact with Kobukan to send some of the Pokémon that have finished their rehabilitation under his watch, as there are not many natural wild Pokémon. Reginald is quite respected at the Foundation. Wick has acknowledged his efforts and highly appreciates him for his skills and dedication to the Foundation, while Faba, well, he's a bit jealous that Reggie is more recognized than him at the Foundation, but for appearance's sake, when in front of others, he acts like he always believed in Reggie's potential. Students from Kobukan would often partake in internships at the Foundation, and after overcoming the initial shock of finding themselves in front of what they believed was a real Registeel, Reggie would quickly become every student's favorite. They would actively follow him around and help him in his duties, often asking him questions, especially ones related to his costume. He is quite happy to answer every student's inquiry, and he would openly encourage everyone to interact with the Pokémon at the Foundation, while also giving tips on how to improve the bonds with their own Pokémon. Some among the students remained so much impressed by Reggie to the point they'd even consider full-time employment at the Foundation after completing their studies. Let me tell you about why I love this guy so much. He is an absolutely charming character, a good-natured fellow who clearly has a lot of passion for what he does. Being based on a canon Pokemon, well, not a canon Pokemon character exactly, but a canon Pokemon card, is pretty funny too. There is I think it's a Registeel card, or maybe it's an Ether Foundation card, I don't quite remember. But basically there is a Pokemon card that has a Registeel just hanging out in the Ether Foundation, and there's an Ether Foundation member just casually talking to him, which is pretty funny considering, what Registeel is, lore-wise. You have to love the guy, Registeely, for being so true to himself. He wanted Pokemon to feel comfortable around him, so he made a costume based on a Pokemon. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But he chose a powerful Pokemon, one of the least Pokemon-y looking ones, this big sort of ancient mass of metal, and he chose it because that was the Pokemon that inspired him, the one that made him feel comfortable. The other Pokemon probably would have been more comfortable in just a genuine honest-to-God fursuit, but he was true to himself, and he knew that he could make, Registeel be a symbol of hope for other people as it was for himself. And that is just beautiful. This is the story of a guy with a Scrimblow who successfully proselytized his Scrimblow to other people, and there's nothing more charming than that. To hear a story about someone who loves something with no self-consciousness about it, and then getting other people to love it as well, that is beautiful. That's what Half is about. I like Registeel a lot. Well done.
So you're the trainer with the Pikachu I saw on TV. Very pleased to meet you. My name's Reginald Stelford, but my friends call me Registeel.
Let's talk about Wilhelm Verer, or more likely Wilhelm Verer. A blue-haired brute with a black past, a green thumb, and a heart of gold. See what I did there? A self-described rough and tough guy, Will's built like a thug and, at first glance, acts like one. But surprisingly, despite his constant dour face and the fact he doesn't like people, Will doesn't enjoy conflict or fighting. He's usually the type to always keep busy, since he's a firm believer in doing instead of saying. So, by those standards, he must love Pokemon, since half of everything he's ever done in his life has been to help them out. That, and the fact that he never frowns whenever he's spending time with Pokemon. Will grew up the only kid of a struggling family in the vastness of Nimbasa City, Unova. Since things were always tough, Will decided to drop out during middle school to get part-time jobs and contract gigs. Instead of building his brain in school, he built his body through courier and construction jobs. Instead of schoolmates, he hung out with dropouts and tough guys. By the time he was 18, Will worked enough minimum wage jobs to figure out he didn't like people, much less people who took their blessings for granted. And, as luck would have it, a perfect opportunity presented itself for young Will. An organization called Team Plasma was recruiting new followers for their cause, liberating Pokemon from their ungrateful trainers. Naturally, this cause resonated with Will, and soon enough he was sporting the uniform and a newly orange hairdo. Of course, it's mandatory. During his few years in Team Plasma, Will caught his first couple of Pokemon. A Cottony, stuck on a Ferris wheel, and an Audino, being bullied in the wild. One lone Sunstone later, and Cottony would become a Whimsicott, ready to liberate any Pokemon unfortunate enough to have a weak trainer. Most Pokemon he liberated were taken by Team Plasma for quote-unquote relocation, but eventually Will would end up meeting his third Pokemon, a Petilil neglected by her trainer for being too weak. After being liberated, Petilil decided, rather selfishly, to stay with Will instead. Another lone Sunstone later, and she became a Lilligant. For the first time in his life, Will felt good. He was helping Pokemon and sending home good money. Too bad it wouldn't last. One terrorist attack on Opelousas City later, and Team Plasma's facade fell apart. Once everyone realized the truth, the entire organization crumbled. As one of the first to surrender to the authorities, along with his cooperation and careful scrutiny of his circumstances, Will was given a relatively lighter sentence. He had to pay for damages caused during his tenure with Team Plasma, live with a big plasma-shaped strike on his record, and Will was expected to return Lilligant to her former trainer. Well, one long court hearing later, Lilligant decided she wanted to stay with Will, so instead he was ordered to pay a transfer fee in installments for custody of Lilligant. From there, Will returned to square one, a life of endless work. This time, however, it was infinitely harder to hold down a job, being ex-Plasma after all. That was until Will met Dean Drayden while wiping down his cafe table. As Will was bowing and scraping, Drayden was intrigued by a young man so earnest enough to apologize that even his Pokemon bowed. Will's atonement would be a job at the Dean's Academy. Now Will works as a gardener and assistant for the medical course of Kobukan Academy, spending most of his time taking care of the garden, feeding wild Pokemon, and stopping fights on campus. Still, he always finds time for picnics with his Pokemon. I love Wilhelm Verer. And I feel like I've said that at the end of every single blurb, but I can't help loving them. I just can't. So, firstly, the concept of an ex-Plasma member who truly 100% believed in Plasma's stated mission of helping Pokemon is a very fun concept. So fun that even the official Pokemon games didn't leave it on the table, and we know how much they like to leave stories hanging. One can easily understand how this tough guy, who doesn't like, entitled, privileged people, would have fallen in with that crowd, how he could have been tricked like so many others. The reality of being a technical ex-con trying to find employment is an extremely fun narrative choice that would give me so many options to work with. Can you imagine how many cast members would hate him without giving him a chance? That's perfect fuel for conflict, drama, and scenes. He also comes with a goal to work towards, working off his debt. His story is so perfectly laid out, and his design is very unique too, being both inviting and off-putting. The mix fits the character well. I like him a lot. Also, this debt, 80,000 to 400,000 Poke paid off, that's... oof. I can just imagine, maybe there's a little indicator on the bottom left-hand side of the screen that shows, how much debt Wilhelm has, and it shows up every time, you're doing a scene with Wilhelm. That'd be fun, I think. Well done.
Hey, no fighting on campus. Break it up before Lily over here busts your head open.
Correct, Alvier. Yes, this is a Kingdom Hearts OC. But bear with me.
It's also very ironic that this is the 13th submission, and it's a Kingdom Hearts reference. Hell yeah!
Let's read from the top. Name and age, if you would. The young man in front of me flinches, gloved hands clenching till the leather creaks around his knuckles. His voice wavers as he speaks. Curix Alvier, ma'am, and I'm 17 years old, I think. You think? How can you not be sure of your own age? He pauses, staring pointedly at the table between us. Then he appears guilty, shaking his head rather erratically. I don't know. I'm sorry. He apologizes swiftly, avoiding my eyes and retreating into himself. He's almost catatonic. I best change my approach. You arrived here unconscious, through what we call an ultra wormhole. The energy readings were off the charts. I don't suppose you know why that is? I'm afraid I don't know that either. My memory is... hazy? He responds, though not before he collects himself. Then can you tell me how far it reaches? How about before you passed out? Can you tell me what happened then? Another shake of the head, another dead end. I grimace, gathering my thoughts as I scribble them down on the clipboard in my lap. What about that Lkti that was with you? It appears to be quite fond of you. Is it a companion of yours? Lkti? Is that what it's called? I'm sorry, I don't recall it ever being my friend, as mean and cruel as that sounds. I'm not sure where it came from or why it protected me, the boy explains carefully, then furrows his eyebrows. I don't even know what it is. What it is? Alvier, how familiar are you with Pokémon exactly? I question, frowning similarly. Not knowing the name of a species is plausible, but not knowing what the creature even is, in its entirety, is almost completely unheard of. At least in our world. This is the first time I'm hearing the term, if that means anything to you, miss. Alvier responds, glancing up briefly and then shying away with a wince not even a moment later, as if afraid of the light that's shining on him. I reach up to the lamp beside me, tilting it away. I then study him silently, and sure enough, there's none of the usual telltale signs of a liar. Is he really, truly, not from a world where Pokémon exist? But if that's the case, just where is he from? Before I can even begin to ask the multiple questions that have crossed my mind during that small exchange, a knock on the wide and somewhat opaque window beside me draws my attention, as well as the attention of the boy across from me. Time's up. I let out a short exhale of disappointment as I rise to my feet. Right, I'm afraid that's all I have time for. I thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Alvier. He nods, looking vaguely relieved as he goes silent once again. I adjust the clipboard and pen under my arm and turn on my heels. Then, I make my swift exit. On the other side, the onlooker turns to me. I squint at the boy in the interrogation room, whose knee is now bouncing anxiously. He must be another faller, I'm sure of it. The energy readings, the amnesia, it all adds up. With readings like these, he's a magnet for the Ultra Beasts, faller or not. If he's speaking the truth, he's as much of a danger to himself as he is a danger to us. So what should we do with him? We can't possibly be thinking of disposing of him. It's just a boy. No, we won't dispose of him. I can see the value in him, as I'm sure you can. But no matter what we decide to do, he must be put under strict supervision. Wait! Sir? Get that Lkti into a Pokeball, will you? And contact Dean Drayden while you're at it. I have a plan. Okay, the design is fantastic, very cool, very classically Kingdom Hearts, very twooey. Twooey. I've never pronounced that word out loud before.
I pronounce it Twewy because it's my favourite game in the entire world. The world ends with you, baby.
And what interests me about this is, well, firstly, it's an OC for a different property, so it seems wild to choose it, right? Hear me out. The blurb for the character is an extremely well-written first-person account of an international police member interrogating him. So much is conveyed through the details and observations of the cop. This blurb tells us very little, but it shows us a lot while being extremely engaging to read. Someone who doesn't even know what a Pokemon is, but comes from an entirely different world with its own creatures, lore, and magic, allows for many fun comparisons as Kurix tries to tie this new world to his old one. I think the most fascinating part of this is that, presumably, Fractured Dusk, the Keyblade here, has become his Lkti. Yet neither Steel nor Fairy are one of his associated types. There's clearly room for expansion there. And what will it be? Will he just ignore his Lkti, living in a world where Keyblades are not needed? Or will Lkti unlock some new form under his guidance? Perhaps a form that allows him to train it with ice, electric, or dark? Will Lkti get forever all keychains? I can't wait to find out. I like this character a lot. Kurix Alvier. Welcome to the Pokemon world. Things are gonna get crazy.
Lkti? Is that what it's called? I'm sorry. I don't recall it ever being my friend, as mean and cruel as that sounds. I'm not sure where it came from or why it protected me. I don't even know what it is.
Alright, let's talk about Phoebe. No, okay, I'm sorry. No, I do love her. Don't kill me for putting her, like, at number 12. I can explain. I swear I can explain. Okay. We good? We good? Okay. Put that gun away. Alright. You know who Phoebe is. And I'm about to make some enemies. Enemies. Let me be clear. Phoebe being in the top 7 is a massive compliment, considering this is my subjective opinion and there were like 169 characters. Many people, I imagine, expected her to be first. However, I think the first place is just slightly more deserving. Stay tuned for that. But for now, let's just read her bio. Hello, welcome to Applebee's. Would you like apples or bees? Bees? They have chosen the bees! Very strong intro. Very good engaging hook. I like that. This is Phoebe. She was born in Nacrene City, Unova. While she grew up there for 10 years, she spent almost all those years in a group home after being given up at birth. Unfortunately, this group home would burn down due to an open stove fire, where Phoebe would almost die before being saved by a Scyther, this Scyther being a Pokemon she befriended during her time there. Being taken to Pinwheel Forest, Phoebe would live in there for about a month before being discovered by Berg. One thing led to another, and Phoebe found herself under legal custody of the gym leader, being whisked away to Castelia City. After a few years of Berg teaching there, Phoebe would insist on attending Kobukan Academy with his recommendation. It was interesting, Berg shows up a lot in some of these OC bios. He's adopted like 7 kids at this point. I did not realize Berg was so popular. It's again that thing where people who like bug types really, really like bug types. Under normal circumstances, the first thing one would learn about Phoebe is her unbridled obsession and knowledge over bug-type Pokemon, to the point where she will find ways to incorporate bug talk in every conversation. She's seen as an eccentric character by many of her peers for only focusing on bug types, to the point of randomizing her afternoon elective. The reason being Phoebe is on a mission to be the very best bug-type trainer like no one ever was, and become a champion, world or otherwise, in order to remove its title of weakest type. Being solely focused on maximizing her understanding of the bug type, Phoebe is unfortunately stubborn and tunnel-visioned. Thus, her arc centers around her realizing that this mentality isn't substantial to her long-term goals, about learning how to use the strengths of the dual typing to complement and to support each other, instead of just propping up the bug type. At the end of it all, perhaps then she'll have what it takes to accomplish her dreams, or even accomplish something new. Now, we all love Phoebe. Let me tell you why I love Phoebe. Phoebe is just so utterly charming. She's sort of in the same boat as Reginald, where her passion pours out of her in this extremely likable way. Her desire to become champion with the weakest type is surprisingly not a unique goal amongst the OCs, but is nevertheless very interesting. It's fun to see characters who hobble themselves for one reason or another. One can easily imagine the various interactions she may have with other characters like Alder or Berg, bug specialists, Berg especially being her mentor/guardian, and then, on the other end of the spectrum, non-bug trainers like Claire or Lance, who would see her intentional crippling of herself as, a weakness, as foolhardiness. The arc outlined for her seems like an interesting exploration into the practicality of compromise. This is rarely something Pokemon characters have to do, but in the Palpverse, where everything is, say, 20% more realistic, it seems like a very interesting path to follow. Much like Gunhill before, her supplemental art shows her as an extremely emotive and colorful character, showing a full range of fun faces. I mean, just look at these. She just bleeds character everywhere. The bug-themed hair, the multiple different kinds of bug-themed hair, in fact, that emotes with her is an extremely cute touch. And this one picture of her being cut off her bug pun alone would be enough to make me pursue her, were she in Palf. And I wasn't making it. I mean, this is adorable. This is extremely cute. Look at that. And of course, we got a classic meme here. Perhaps this is one of Heroki Bennett's, one of the Legion. Have you noticed you can't spell a Legion without multiple letters from the word pigeon? Did I already use that joke? Anyway, I love Phoebe. I think we all love Phoebe. And, I'm not sure there's much more to say that hasn't already been said. This is clearly a character with a ton of love poured into her, and it's not hard to love her at that. Well done.
Aw, what's wrong? Am I bugged?
Stop it!
Orion Subaki. There are a couple characters that were submitted to the OC contest that are extremely powerful, very clearly not a first-year Kobukan student, which is completely fine. An association with Kobukan isn't even necessarily necessary. And I think that this is probably my favorite of the entire gang of the extremely powerful OCs. He is a champion and acquaintance of Cynthia, who has learned much through his victories, and more through his failures. Let's read about him. He is the champion of the Alvier region, on leave from the position and his job as a professor of philosophy and psychology. Orion joined the Kobukan Academy faculty to act as both student academic advisor and on-site counselor, at the behest of Dean Drayden after the incident with Sharon. It's necessary, yeah. The school should really have one of those. Growing up under the care of his uncle after his parents died in a work-related accident, they were archaeologists, Orion was close with a girl his age, Cynthia Sharona. My Sharona! The parents had been close, her father an archaeologist and friend to his parents, and he spent much of his time with their family. Enraptured by Cynthia's mother, the then champion of Alvier, Orion and Cynthia both made a promise with one another, to be the best like no one ever was and become the strongest trainers ever known. His childhood dream became an obsession as Orion aged, fueled by the emotional and rare physical abuse from his uncle who tried to dissuade him, telling him he'd never be the best, and to settle for less, even going so far as to forbid him from becoming a trainer. However, in their teens, Orion and Cynthia both took on an internship with Professor Rowan, becoming trainers. When they were 18, the two joined Kobukan, where their paths would split. Shaken out of the pure pursuit of strength by her father's death, Cynthia began to focus on anthropology and myths. Orion, however, fell even further into the obsessive chase of strength above all else, Kobukan's inherent competitiveness causing him to forego friendships and push his Pokemon harshly. By the end of the year, he and Cynthia had a falling out when Cynthia still managed to best him as the strongest trainer of their year, despite her abandonment of their childhood promise. For the next few years, Orion trained ceaselessly, pushing his Pokemon to the breaking point in a way that was even abusive. This culminated in a moment where Orion accidentally forced one of his Pokemon, a Growlithe, to evolve, despite her wishes not to. After this, his Pokemon began to abandon him, save for those few who were closest to him. Around this time, Orion would run into AZ. Not that Orion knew who the old king was, who spoke to Orion of his own experiences of pushing away loved ones, obsessively chasing a dream, and his vast regret over all that he had done. AZ's words managed to sway Orion, and he began to change his ways. He became kinder, mending old relationships he had broken when he could, including with Cynthia, though that took the longest, even now only slowly returning to what it once was, doing what he could to make up for his past mistakes to people and Pokemon alike. He began studying psychology and philosophy, his old interest in history and mythology returning. He still trained and pushed his Pokemon and himself, but now with the goal of becoming the best versions of themselves, not merely the strongest. This culminated in becoming the new champion of Alvier, surprising the region and world, not just with his strengths, but with also his humility. Eventually, he joined the school board with the long-term goal of changing the school culture to one that is less harsh and, while still turning out the greatest of trainers, does so without sacrificing the students' relationships so that no one ends up like he did. For example, he's been trying to remove the bottom 20% rule, wanting to replace it with a minimum academic requirement that, while enormously challenging, would allow for a 100% graduation rate. We have to wish him luck then, don't we? So this is presumably how Orion Subaki looked when he was younger. Sort of in his peak as a champion, perhaps? And I imagine this is a more modern iteration of him, after he's been working for a while as counselor at Kobukan. It does appear that Miss Sharona and Orion may be on the mend. I wish him luck. Also, I totally ship him. And this is his signature Pokemon. Presumably a Pokemon unique to the Alvier region. Now, let's talk about this guy, because I have feelings and I have thoughts. His story is delightfully tragic. One can understand how a man in his position, who never had the support he needed in his dreams, would seek power out relentlessly once he had the power to do so, creating a vicious cycle. But Cynthia represents a narrative blockade in Palf, an absolute, and Orion's author, utilizes Cynthia perfectly. What is the pursuit of power in the face of inevitability? This is another character who I love, like Orange Citra, because the author was willing to make him a villain, or at least commit villainous acts. He pushed his Pokemon to their breaking point. So maddened was he that he couldn't achieve his goal despite his lifelong dedication. He even reflected his uncle's abuse onto his Pokemon, giving them some of that delicious generational trauma. Do you think he ever yelled at them that they wouldn't be strong enough? And do you think he felt like shit after that? God, I hope so. That would be so tragic. I love that. Having a conversation with AZ, even if he did not know who AZ was, and having that turn him around, remember the love and friendship that brought him to where he is an extremely fitting and meaningful way of wrapping up the storyline. I mean, like, this one blurb utilized AZ better than Pokemon X and Y did. And yet, there is still room to improve. He's now at Kobukan as a counselor, given the dire need for such things due to Charon's actions. Apparently it's Charon, I thought it was Sharon. So one can easily imagine how his story plays out. Going to attend counseling sessions with him, trying to get over your own fear of being friendless, your own recurrent mutism. I'm assuming you're playing as Red here. While also learning about him, about his past, about his mistakes, and maybe, repairing his relationship with Cynthia. This is such a well thought out plot. His design also commands respect. One can easily believe he is a champion, but it doesn't go over the top. Like, it isn't super crazy. And the shared fondness he and Cynthia have for Longcoats is cute. It's a risky thing to say that your character is like the childhood friend of the goddess of the Pokemon world, essentially, but I believe this character does it extremely well in a justifiable way that comes off as reasonable, measured, and very cool. I like Orion Subaki a lot.
In this life, we're nothing without our relationships. Don't push them away, because one day it'll be too late to pull them back in.
Maeve Shiler. Okay, so let's address the elephant in the room. This design grabbed me by the face and made me kneel. Like, damn, that is a strong piece of art. There is only one art asset in this whole submission, but it is such a strong one that commands attention and interest. Let's talk about her. Team Rocket was an organization steeped in corruption, blackmail, theft, murder, and worst of all, human and Pokemon experimentation. The Rocket Super Soldier program, for instance, involves surgeries to place computer chips on the spinal cord and thread wires through the body in hopes of providing superhuman strength. Oh, and thread wires through the body. Oops. The lucky test subjects died, while those unlucky were left crippled or comatose. Maeve Shiler, a former grunt who had volunteered for the procedure, was one of the unlucky, wheelchair-bound on the best days and immobile on the worst. After Rocket's fall, she spent her early 20s in rehab, struggling to build the bare minimum of strength to live. Despite her physical weakness, however, her mind was hungry to grow. Prior to her disability, she was a skilled battler among the Rockets. During her rehab, Maeve kept herself informed on the competitive Pokemon scene. She watched recordings of current League and Champion battles, paid attention to the strategies used, and kept track of standout contenders. No matter how obsessively she studied battling, though, it couldn't stand up to first-hand practice. 2 years after Rocket's fall, Maeve was past the constant therapy, living in Celadon City with as little assistance as she could manage. She continued to study competitive battling fervently, but no amount of studying could help her lift a Pokeball or yell commands. She wasn't even well enough to own a Pokemon. It was clear that she was upset, however, so Maeve's caretaker bought her a Pokemon that seemed like it would need no upkeep whatsoever. A Porygon. In an ironic twist of fate, the implants running through Maeve's body held enough hardware for her Porygon, affectionately named Nero, to enter and puppeteer her body. It was painful, and she could only stand for a few minutes per day at first, but it was enough to regain her life. She was ready to return to the battling scene. Maeve's Pokemon had been confiscated after Rocket's fall, so she had to rebuild her team from the ground up. Despite that, she qualified to challenge the Indigo League in only 2.5 years. Her preferred team was unique, primarily built around Pokemon who had telepathy or could read minds. This saved her time when her body couldn't keep up, as well as giving her an unpredictable competitive edge. While she was not a popular contender, both for her history and her disability, she performed well, finally being decisively walled out by Karen. After her defeat, however, Lance came to offer her a position as an assistant teacher for the battle team. After some deliberation, she accepted. Maeve is 28, has short ginger hair, and is rarely seen off her wheelchair. Formerly an impulsive adrenaline junkie, her disability caused her to become more level-headed, usually. Her body is paralyzed from the chest down, so even breathing can be taxing. But with Nero's assistance, she can move about up to 4 hours per day. She also has a Rotom, named McQueen, who frequently possesses her wheelchair. Her League Challenge team consisted of Espeon, Shiftry, Gardevoir, Poliwrath, Noivern, and Hitmonlee. Her battle style, consisting of tactical buffs and disrupting swaps, was made even more potent by her nonverbal instructions. She's training to challenge the Indigo League again. Maeve's relationships in Kobukan are complex. Most faculty are wary of her, considering her past. She gets along best with Koga and Karen, and surprisingly, Lieutenant Surge, who helps her train her body under Nero's control. She is disliked by Byron, Marshall, and Olivia, all of whom have particular disdain for her past choices as a rocket. I'd just like to say that, this is... Given who this character is, you have absolutely nailed what her relationships would be like with the rest of the faculty. I mean, we need, Dr. MMCC to confirm, but from my perspective, this is a 100% on-point analysis of the faculty of Kobukan. Moving on, she only knows a few students. In the battle team, she gets along best with Sonia and Leaf, both of whom are flexible, capable students open to her mentoring. On the other hand, Silver avoids her, reasonable, and Erica makes no effort to hide her dislike of Maeve. Again, excellent analysis of essentially how people would react to this sort of character. She is also familiar with a number of nursing students, like Whitney and Yellow. Alright, now let's talk about Maeve for a bit. Her story is one of recovery in a really realistic way. It's not instant cures. It's not leaps and bounds, but incremental progress, like moving a wheelchair up a mountain. Slowly, and with effort, but inexorably there. Maeve has every advantage against her. A history of crime, a paralyzed body, and even a league attempt that did not reach the champion. But she still rolls on. It's extremely interesting, I think, because it's never really mentioned that Maeve is repentant. For volunteering for the procedure in the first place, it seems as though Maeve may have been a rocket diehard. Even now, paralyzed and betrayed, perhaps she still doesn't regret her actions. I think this opens the doors for a very interesting story about accepting one's past misdeeds and living with the consequences, but not with regret. Or perhaps there's even a chance where she could return to Rocket and has to wonder whether she tries to take up the life she sacrificed everything for a decade ago. Or maybe, perhaps more fittingly, she tries to prevent someone else from sacrificing everything for people who don't care about them. Who knows? Either way, she would be a very, very fun character to have in battle team scenes. She would add a lot to the dynamic of the current battle team. A great addition. Thank you very much for Maeve Shiler. Well done.
Listen, Bozo, we all make choices. Mine left me in a wheelchair, and you don't see me bitching about it. Now drop and give me 20.
Elaeatrus. Yes, that is how the name is pronounced, I asked. A proud young lady who acts nobly in all things, but learns nobility is what one does, not the blood one carries. She comes from a rich family that claims their bloodline directly descends from the ancient Galarian kings. She believes that it's her duty to live up to her ancestors' legendary achievements. Having grown up hearing stories of knights, kings, and heroes, she admires people like that and tries to emulate that behavior. To her, being a noble means helping the less fortunate and setting an example for others. Attending Kobukan to prepare for her challenge of the Galarian League, she despises how capitalism has sullied the honor that duels between Pokemon trainers once had, and she plans to gain fame and influence to upend the system from the inside. Personality. Outwardly haughty, overbearing, and egotistical, but beneath that lies a kind young woman who takes care of others. She supports anyone who tries their best. On the other hand, she is strict with unmotivated people. A sucker for talented individuals will often offer to hire them on the spot. She introduces herself by her very long full name, which nobody else seems to remember after Elaeatrus, She lets her friends call her Ellie instead. How magnanimous of her. She turns flushed and dizzy with the smallest sip of alcohol, and has been told that she looks like a spindo when that happens. She sticks to punch at parties. She fences with her Pokémon as part of their training. Cleaning the blade is therapeutic for her. And she secretly enjoys those Reborn as a Villainess light novels. She reads them in the library, hidden behind a textbook of Galarian history. Now let's talk about some ideas for the story here. Ellie's arc fits into the Rusted Sword storyline. Having always wanted to follow in the footsteps of the great kings of old, what happens when she learns that she isn't actually their descendant at all? Nate's research into Bea, Hilbert, and Bianca's cases reveals devastating secrets. The existence of the Rusted Sword, the true story of the Darkest Day 3,000 years prior, and the real bloodlines of the ancient Galarian kings from which Ellie's family are only branch descendants, with no legitimate claim to royalty. She is heartbroken after Red shows her this evidence, and questions what meaning her life has had up until now. She challenges Red and his Pikachu to a battle, in the hopes of proving herself as a king. Win or lose, Pikachu's Liberage never activates, but Red promises that her noble attitude is what he respects, not who her great-grandparents are, or whatnot. With Red's encouragement, Ellie once again resolves to act on her beliefs, not just for herself this time, but also for the people that believe in her. For relationships, she gets along surprisingly well with Ethan, who always calls her by one of her many surnames. Apparently, she thinks he's trying his best to remember them all. He isn't, though. He's just Ethaning. She has never personally met Sharon, but thinks of him as an inconsiderate twat for causing such a commotion over his personal hang-ups. Would laugh if she heard him comparing himself to Lancelot. To be fair, he did so as an insult. Lancelot is history's greatest, well, mythology's greatest traitor. Well, I know that also isn't true. I don't like Lancelot, alright? I also think he's a twat.
Resident Brit here, jumping in just to say it's pronounced twat. Cool. Carry on.
She finds herself worrying about that timid green-haired boy in her fighting elective. Too bad he runs away whenever she tries to approach him. Okay, let's talk about Elatrice and why she is so fantastic. But firstly, let me do one of those Ojo-sama laughs. Apologies. So, the concept of a character who idolizes an old way of life and wishes to return to it is one that I personally love. Not in a return to the good old days kind of way, but in a return to ye olden days kind of way. Despising the modern state of battles in Galar, flashy, commercialized, prioritizing showmanship over everything else, is a very fun character trait that makes a lot of sense in universe, especially for one whose head is full of dreams of chivalry and nobility. The personality, strict with slackers, kind to those who try their best, is an extremely enjoyable one that I don't think many in Palth have, except sorta Janine and maybe Karen/Claire a bit. The haughty noblewoman who practices fencing is a classic trope that I absolutely adore. I want there to be a scene where she somehow ropes Red into it, knocks him onto the ground, and then can tip his chin up with the tip of her foil. That is such a classic scene. Yes, it's a cliche, but that is a cliche that deserves to live, my guys. The fact she's also secretly a bit of a dork, being a lightweight drunk and enjoying isekai trash, is quite fun. One can easily imagine the scenes where the protagonist learns this, with her, adamantly maintaining that a noble is used to a higher quality of alcohol, so of course I would get drunk. And these isekai are, quite historically accurate, and they teach important lessons about military strategy, economics, and diplomacy. Her arc being about realizing that she is not truly a noble, but then having Red and Pikachu help her realize she can be noble, to live up to the ideal that never existed, is a fantastic piece of storytelling. I've mentioned before the Arknight's character Grani, who lives in a world where night battles are very commercialized and corporatized in a nation called Casimiras. But yeah, there's a woman named Grani who lives in a different nation named Victoria, who idolizes the Knights of Stories, who's basically like a Kazimierz Rabu, and she's trying to live up to the legacy of those ancient knights. But because she's living up to a legacy, an ideal that never hasn't existed for hundreds of years, she's a better knight than the actual ones. And Elaeatriss's story reminds me of that, strongly of that, and that's fantastic, because I love Grani's story. Also, for speech patterns, there are a couple quotes at the bottom of the text file. I encourage you to go read those. Show a tremendous amount of character, and I can imagine her being extremely entertaining to both read and write. Also, her design is very appealing. Noble, beautiful, haughty, sexy, love it. The band of luxury balls on her belt, if you zoom in on these, you can see that these are quite clearly luxury balls. It says so much. Finally, all the information conveyed in her bio feels meaningful, important, and it's formatted perfectly for readability, engagement, and organization. There is one complaint, though. I do want to know what her full name is, and that was Elaeatriss, a character that I very much like. Intensely interesting. I think she would be very fun. I would definitely check out her route if she were in Palf.
I won't forgive undue rudeness or vulgarity. That goes for myself as well. Proper etiquette does a noble make, after all.
Yep, that's right. It's time to talk about Kyper, the actual next post. I didn't decide that these were both fantastic. That was entirely the author's decision. Background. A former Team Galactic member on the run. Upon discovering that Cyrus never planned to share his new world, he stole the team's funding and enrolled at Kobukan. Grunts pursue him whenever he steps off campus. Personality. A calculatingly logical young man, this self-inflicted loner makes no attempt to get along with others. He doesn't like relying on people, so he proactively repays his debts. On the other hand, he enjoys being owed favors, and doesn't mind helping out if he's being compensated. He always states his opinions honestly. It's not that he's incapable of lying, but that he doesn't see the point in being considerate. Trivia. He incidentally learned parkour with how often he finds himself running through alleys. He has a scar on his arm from a bad slip. His Yanma, his party containing a Murkrow, a Bronzor, a Yanma, and a Wormadam, his Yanma comes from Pastoria's Great Marsh. During the Galactic Bomb incident, the explosion startled the Pokémon inside, many of whom escaped. Kyper caught this one while standing guard. He has near-perfect grades. Despite that, his teachers, especially Karen, dislike his attitude. He is in Dark, Psychic, and Bug, so yes, I can see why his teachers wouldn't get along well with this sort of... Yeah. Let's talk about his story now. Red is in the city when he overhears yelling from an alley, seeing Kyper running from a group of weirdly uniformed people. Red battles them to help him escape. After regrouping, Kyper explains who Team Galactic are and his past with them. Kyper later tries to repay the favor, but Red states that he just wants to know why Kyper is so against making friends. He explains that as a young orphan on the streets of Veilstone, he could only count on himself. After being indoctrinated by Team Galactic, and subsequently betrayed by Cyrus, his self-sufficient mindset was only reinforced. During his latest escape, Kyper's Murkrow's Pokeball falls off his belt and is taken. To retrieve it, Kyper calls Red to help him infiltrate the Galactic Inspira hideout. The mission culminates in a battle with Karen, who's been leading the pursuit of Kyper. With Red's assistance, Kyper defeats Karen, forcing him to leave Kyper alone once and for all. After seeing in action how the Foreveralls draw strength from the user's bonds, Kyper finds Red's existence a threat to his beliefs. With their ideologies opposed, Kyper challenges Red to a battle, stating that it's the only way to truly decide whose way is correct. Winning this battle is mandatory to finish Kyper's route. After Red wins, Kyper asks if all trainers who rely on their friends can become that strong. Red replies that he doesn't know, but he can say that even if it hadn't been him who ran into Kyper back then, any other strong trainer he knows would also have tried to help. Afterwards, Kyper says he'll keep an eye on Red's journey to becoming a champion since he still isn't fully convinced. Despite his protests, Red quietly notices he's added a Snome to his team, a Pokemon that's extremely weak before its friendship evolution. Now let's talk about Kyper and why I thought these two posts in a row were so deserving, and why I actually thought Kyper deserved a spot right above Elatrice. So he is an ex-Galactic run, on the run from his past, his future, and his friends. Let's look at this design. Kyper has an extremely strong design that immediately tells you what he's about. You can see how the blue bowl cut is fading, but not yet entirely gone. His outfit is clearly a Galactic-inspired one, but much more casual. The kind of thing Team Galactic probably gave out to chill out in their barracks with, you know. His eyes are cold and piercing. Kyper's story is another one that lends itself to extremely interesting storytelling possibilities. He has such a valid reason for being a loner, you know? As an orphan, he finally found belonging with Team Galactic, but then was betrayed and abandoned by them as well. He's like the anti-Red, where he goes out of his way to prevent connections forming between him and others, for fear of becoming hurt through them. Now, this isn't groundbreaking new material. I see a lot of Grusha in him, but the way it's executed, composited with that design, is so damn well done. The outline laid out for the character's story is comprehensive, and something that I 100% can see fitting into the story of Palf as it is now. The final boss of his route, besides himself, being Karen, works with the stakes and scale of this game so well. This character could fit into the game absolutely perfectly as is, with zero modifications. And it has a hopeful, if not necessarily happy, ending. This character is a masterpiece, from beginning to end. Even if I have slightly less to say about him than Elatrice, Kyper is easily higher on the list than she was. And she was number 4. Amazing job to both people involved in this project. I will be thinking about Elatrice and Kyper for a long time.
Envy, loneliness, self-deprecation. These emotions that stem from relationships are only distractions. I would rather be alone than deal with them.
Alright, let's talk about this. This is just what Mandy Lee does. She comes into the server once every 2 months, wins a contest, refuses to elaborate, and leaves. Amazing work again, Mandy. Absolute Giga Chad behavior. Let's talk about Trinity Blade. Trinity is the witty, sexy freelancer and manager of the Dizzy Punch Bar with a penchant for music, mental health, and monkeys. Cool, mischievous, and a free spirit, Trin is the type of girl who will absolutely distract you with a kiss just to seal your fries, but also be the one you call at 2 a.m. for a ride, no questions asked. She likes teasing you and playing music, dislikes her crappy moped. Let's get her an upgrade, people. We can do this. Trin's family consists of her 3 older brothers and their Pokemon. She was quite the wild child, but she loved helping just as much as playing. Her brothers ran a bar, the Dizzy Punch. She loved thinking up menu items and singing on stage. She would sing the Poke Rap to see how far she could get. Her current score was 672 Pokemon. Not bad by any stretch of the imagination. Everyone was happy. Things changed when she was 15. It was a rainy night when the car lost control. When Trin woke up, she had a broken leg and her brothers were gone. Her brothers' Pokemon, Rillaboom, Oranguru, and Slacking, had PTSD and frequent bouts of aggressive behavior. The funeral did not go well. Afterwards, they were kept away, but Trin protested that they were family. Whenever she wasn't in physical therapy, she would rest in a garden with her brother's Pokemon. She would sing and play music to them to help them calm down. To the doctor's surprise, it was very helpful. After months of physical therapy, Trin was able to walk again. Most of her brother's savings were spent on the medical bills. With little left, it was high time she got to working. Thank goodness Oranguru was really intelligent, and Trin remembered a lot of the day-to-day business. She reopened the Dizzy Punch and let Oranguru handle the bar while she cooked in the kitchen. Oranguru, Rillaboom, Slacking, and Trin ended up in the newspapers that year, Many people were surprised at the thought of a Pokemon in human-ran bar. They ended up doing rather well. By night, Trin worked at the Dizzy Bunch, and by day she was a freelancer. She cruises around Kobukan City on her crappy moped, looking for any odd job she can find. In between jobs, Trin plays music in the park for any human or Pokemon willing to listen. She's been nicknamed the Poke Charmer, thanks to her musical skills. Ever since her time in the hospital, Trin has been very interested in researching and testing musical theory, and how it can affect Pokemon's mental/physical health. Dean Drayden is a regular at the Dizzy Punch, so he easily recognized Trin at the park one day. They had a riveting discussion about how music can be used to help draw in, calm, energize, coordinate, and even help Pokemon rehabilitate. Drayden offered that Trin occasionally visit Kobukan Academy to teach a few after-hour seminars on music theory. It's been a year since Trin said yes, and she has had a blast. Even if it is only thrice a year, she looks forward to visiting Kobukan. Recently, though, Drayden has asked her about visiting more frequently. It was hard to hear on her crappy phone that sounded like something about wild, frenzied Pokemon? Now, let me gush. We're not talking anymore. We are gushing about Trinity Blade. I absolutely adore Trinity for, fittingly, 3 reasons. Firstly, she opens up an entirely new and totally viable location to visit in Inspira. The Dizzy Punch being a Pokemon in human-run bar is such a fun idea, and one can totally imagine what sort of scenes would take place there. She adds a large and satisfying chunk of lore to the city of Inspira that opens up so many avenues to tell stories in. The second thing is, I adore how her skill with music translates into Pokemon soothing. In a world where almost every skill feeds into one's relationships with Pokemon in some way, being able to soothe Pokemon with music, an established skill that many Pokemon characters have, is such an obvious and awesome thing to implement into Palf, and yet it just hasn't been done yet. Her story of overcoming her brother's deaths, soothing their Pokemon, and healing together is one of great tragedy, but also victory. Showing the strength to be able to move past that loss and use your own coping mechanism to heal others makes her an extremely meaningful character. I adore her. And her title as Poke Charmer really brings to mind the talents of the various manga characters. Also, the Dizzy Punch is a great name for a bar, but that's not the third thing. The third and final thing is, oh my god, that art! Look at this! My god, just look at the thumbnail there. It's so bright, it's so colorful. Mandy expertly conveys so many aspects of Trinity's character with the 2 outfits, the barkeeper outfit and the rocker outfit. The little scenes as slices into life, here, here, here. And of course, the many adorable and funny menu options. I heavily encourage you to look at this post and look at them in detail, because they're very, very clever. Again, Trinity brings her with an entire chunk of world building that fits in perfectly with the established world. One really feels like they have a solid understanding of Trinity, given we have so many angles to look at her from. Amazing work, amazing characterization, and it is only by a hair that this is not number 1. If I was giving extra points for puns, though, this would win. Brilliant work. I absolutely adore this character.
Welcome to the Dizzy Punch. Oh, it's you. Couldn't stay away, huh? Take a seat. I'll fix you up something perfect.
Reverie Purdue is number 1. Let's talk about her. Eerie used to be a college student in the real world, with a fascination for things that didn't physically exist. Ghosts, mythology, magic, karma, the likes. She goes out of her way to search for unexplainable occurrences, just to ponder what supernatural phenomenon could have caused it. Eerie is fully aware of the scientific explanation to everything, really. However, all that turns on its head when she discovers something real, an ultra wormhole. Curiosity getting the better of her, Eerie would get far too close to the anomaly and accidentally fall inside. She wakes up in a hotel within Inspira City with nothing but the clothes on her back, and despite having no memory of doing so, Records show that she came in last night. In fact, Erie has little to no memory of anything before she woke up, not even finding the Ultra Wormhole. Erie meanders the streets before finding a Litwick being bullied by a Tranquil. To her surprise, she's able to fend off the Tranquil with ease in a Pokémon battle. This is how Erie is spotted, and promptly scolded by Dean Drayden for missing an entire month of education. Even after explaining to him that she lost her memories, and that the Litwick is not hers, and that she has no idea what a Pokémon is, the records don't lie, and Drayden insists she still attend Kobukan. Erie goes along with it, and receives a late starter, a Cottony. Maybe she can find her answers along the way. With everything that's happened, Erie is quite internally distressed, causing her to appear aloof yet volatile. While her first weeks are more than confusing, not just for her, Erie becomes fascinated with the Pokémon and all they can do. Erie's story follows her as she vigorously tries to rediscover her lost memories, find out what happened to her, and how she can return home. However, when the time comes, will she be willing to leave it all behind? Here are my thoughts on Reverie Purdue. A real-world college student with a fascination for the supernatural who ends up in Kobukan. This is not an extraordinarily complicated character. In fact, in terms of details, it's rather sparse. There are definitely more original concepts in this celebration, but the blurb was written so well, and the mysterious hook is so engaging, that I am on the edge of my seat wanting to know more. Reverie sets herself apart from other isekai characters in that not only does she appear within the Pokemon world, but she also comes with a past, a history, even written records. From the perspective of the Palfiverse, she has always been here. This is an absolutely fascinating turn on the head of the isekai formula, and I am chomping at the bit to learn why this is and what it means. What I think is even more interesting is that she is a follower. This means she has an easy connection to the Ultra Beasts, but doesn't even necessarily remember that she came from our world, just flashes and glimpses of a life that's incompatible with the reality she now knows. Imagine the plot twists and plot progression as you grow closer with this amnesiac girl and eventually learn that she came from the world you, the player, comes from. Imagine finishing Reverie's bond and knowing that you might see Reverie on the other side of the train platform one day. This character is number one, because this character has tremendous potential to have a real-world impact on the player, specifically because we hide that she is an isekai character, even from herself. There's also a lot of opportunity to bring the actual human player in as a third party. Bring you in as a third party. Imagine if your bond with Reverie is not the bond of Reverie and Red, being controlled by you, but of Reverie and you personally. Imagine if the supernatural phenomenon she researches in the world of the Palfiverse is you. Again, you personally. There's an absolutely undiscovered world of potential here. I need to see this story writ large. I also personally like she wasn't really a Pokemon fan, or wasn't necessarily a Pokemon fan at all before she was isekai'd, leading her into being sort of an anti-isekai character. She doesn't come in with cheats or hacks or anything, just boundless curiosity for what cannot be. And of course the story ends with a question at the end of every isekai. Some tropes are immortal. Will she sacrifice her bonds with the people she now loves to seek a past that she can no longer lay claim to? I wish I knew. Someone, please, tell me! This is not my story to write, but good lord do I want to! It almost feels like an afterthought after such an incredibly well-done premise and execution, but it's also worth mentioning her design is extremely charming. It says ghost and fairy very well, while also being super cute, and very Pokemon-y, for lack of a better word. The stars in her eyes are a beautiful touch. If she was in Pokemon Academy life forever, she would likely be my favorite character.
Where am I? What is this place? Who are these people? What are these creatures? I don't understand. Please. I must study them.
It's funny how it all began with Sonichu. Let's do a little thing here. I'm just going to keep talking until we hit the bottom. I want to thank everyone for everything you've done, for all the passion you've put into this, for all the support you showed each other during the process. I love OCs. I always have. I got back into Pokemon because of DeviantArt, because I got really into someone's Pokemon-themed OCs, and seeing all these memories, these passions, these dreams just brought to life. Hey, there's Dolph. I love Dolph. It was a thoroughly enjoyable experience. Thank you so much for sharing your creations with me. And thank you for letting me share my Freudian creations with you. I learned a lot throughout this process. I learned that I can never again underestimate the community, that you are always going to go above and beyond to impress me. I learned that in the future I'm probably going to have to be quite a bit more restrictive about how many entries I allow into a single competition. I learned that the community is just as creative, just as brilliant as I couldn't have even expected. If I hadn't picked up Pokemon Academy Life, I am certain that this amazing community would have. I love you guys, really. And to be quite frank, I am somewhat out of things to say. And we are only like a third of the way through. You know, I said that I've learned not to underestimate the community anymore. But it kind of seems like I did it again, like just now. Just look at this. Maybe I should bring up some honorable mentions while we're scrolling through. As I mentioned previously, there were a bunch of other characters that I wanted to make videos on. I just didn't have the time for it. One of those was Alder Bears, whose submission was extremely fun to read. I would have loved to have read that one out loud. Another one was Gene Eric, who honestly, concept kinda slaps. Like, I gave that a perfect 15 for writing score. The idea of this, you know, evil person who is sort of self-hypnotized and continued this legacy of sort of an insidious reincarnation is super fascinating. Since we just scrolled past her, Greyagawa, her design, super cute. Absolutely love it. It was just Emil, just slightly more eye-catching. Xavier Ozymandias is another one who I really appreciated. The sort of magician slash vigilante slash Wild West bringing justice to the lawless wasteland of Or is another one that really stuck with me. I liked Jules quite a lot. Her biography it stood out to me in a good way. When it starts with, yes, Watson was a member of the Mafia. I mean, that's a strong start. And I actually, it made sense, it felt like it worked within the world. Even though it was predicated on the notion of Watson being a member of the Mafia. Lindsay was another one. Let me see, what was her last name again? Oh yes, Lindsay Tatsuhara. She was another one that I quite liked. The idea of this sort of character who has a relationship with Lance, and they sort of play off each other. I thought that was extremely fun, being Lance's niece. Both of Kirby's characters, I thought, had absolutely amazing writing concepts. Like, fair play to both of those. And you were right, Scrimblow McDingus did kind of rock as a concept. Honestly, I would be quite interested in seeing how that story would play out. Bianca van Hanen is another one I should mention. Absolutely adored her design. Honestly, one of the most solid designs out of the entire competition. I liked it a lot. Looks like we're almost at the end now, so I suppose I should say my goodbyes, say thank you everyone for your participation. You did a fantastic job, each and every one of you, and to everyone who submitted, I'm extremely proud of you for trying. Thank you.
And a very quick final word from me. It was an absolute pleasure getting the opportunity to edit this video and voice all of your fantastic, wonderful OCs. They obviously had so much time and effort put into them. There's so much love and devotion on the page that reading and listening to Freud read them all out was absolutely fantastic. I have found this experience absolutely delightful, and keep being awesome. You guys are fantastic, and until next time.